Negotiations under fire. Iran attacks the Gulf states, and the negotiations are still deadlocked. A night of blows. The United States attacked radar sites in southern Iran, and the Revolutionary Guards responded with fire towards the Gulf. And then Iran suffered a fatal blow. The satellite images that prove how Iran deceived everyone. The Gulf states once again felt Iran's heavy hand, and when they were attacked as part of the exchange of fire with the United States, what happened? So despite this provocation attempt, both Washington and Tehran continue to project optimism, while the two key issues remain unresolved: the nuclear program and the release of the funds. And right now, it seems that Iran has broken the barrier of fear in facing the United States, and this could spill out of control. While the exchange of fire in the Gulf continues over the last several nights, it is clear that this is not a passing incident, but an expansion of a new strategic concept that Tehran has been shaping since the war began. The collapse of the regional proxy concept has led the leadership of the Revolutionary Guards to the conclusion that direct and controlled friction with the United States can rebuild its deterrence. Will they succeed? Let me know in the comments, what do you think? I'm Yair Pinto. With me is Mati Shoshani. We are on boots on the ground, reporting to you the whole truth about what's happening here in Israel, and also the full truth about what's happening in our neighborhood, the Middle East. And today is June 7, so let's begin. The exchange of fire between Iranian and American forces over the last several nights has still not deteriorated into a broad confrontation, but it reflects a deeper trend: Tehran's attempt to rebuild the deterrence equation against the United States, alongside its unwillingness to accept any attempt to undermine the new status quo it is trying to impose in the Strait of Hormuz. So, we are in a stage of a war that can be called negotiations under fire. While the American administration is preparing for an agreement with Iran and assembling a team for the nuclear talks, the Persian Gulf is not quiet. Tonight, between Friday and Saturday, just this past weekend, the United States and Iran each carried out attacks in turn that included fighter jets, drones, and even ballistic missiles. At around 1:30 at night, Iran launched several drones towards the Strait of Hormuz. And at the same time, the Iranian news agency Mahar reported that several warning shots were fired near the strait, apparently because of the movement of American vessels. CENTCOM confirmed shortly afterwards that its forces shut down 4 of the Iranian drones using fighter jets, and that the radar sites were attacked in the city of Guruk and on Qasem Island in southern Iran in order to defend against additional similar attacks. Later, the Air Force systems in Kuwait and Bahrain were activated. The Revolutionary Guards announced that they had launched ballistic missiles and hit American bases in the Gulf region in response to the attack that was carried out earlier by the United States forces. CENTCOM announced that Iran launched 7 ballistic missiles towards Kuwait and Bahrain, and that 6 of them were intercepted. One additional missile, according to the United States Central Command, did not reach its target. It was also stated that no reports had been received about American soldiers that are being injured, and that the Iranian claims of a hit on the United States 5th Fleet headquarters in Bahrain are false. President Trump's envoys Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff secretly visited the Oak Ridge National a special team of about 100 American nuclear experts. The visit was intended to prepare the professional and the technical infrastructure ahead of the possible implementation of a nuclear agreement with Iran. These experts, who have already taken part in a complex operation in the past, will be responsible for forming plans to remove the nuclear materials, to limit the enrichment, and to establish inspection mechanisms. The meeting took place against the backdrop of White House efforts to formulate a memorandum of understanding with Tehran, which is now in its final stretch. The current memorandum includes a framework for extending the ceasefire by 60 days, reopening the Strait of Hormuz, granting Iran permission to sell oil, and launching talks on eliminating its stockpile of enriched uranium. Officials emphasize that the preparations at the Oak Ridge indicate the seriousness of the negotiations and their high chance of success. This is even though the final agreement has not yet been signed. And despite the optimism, there are still gaps between the sides that require a decision. The main disagreement concerns Trump's demand for a 60-day timetable for diluting the uranium compared with an Iranian demand for 90 days, as well as the dispute over the scope and timing of the release of the frozen Iranian funds. While the United States makes the release of the funds conditional on real steps on the ground, Iran is demanding an immediate release and signaling internal disagreement in Tehran about the way moving forward. While the contacts for a nuclear agreement and a ceasefire continue, Tehran is demanding immediate access to billions of dollars from its frozen assets. Washington refuses to pay in advance, and the crisis is becoming more complicated. Why? Because in Iran, they are already declaring the victory of the resistance and immediately demanding $12 billion in cash out of about $100 billion. The American president finds himself in exactly the same trap that Obama was in. While Washington insists that no amount will be transferred in advance, Tehran claims this is not an incentive. This is our money. Following all of this, it seems that the Revolutionary Guards are applying very heavy pressure over the frozen funds. And while Iran fires nonstop towards its neighbors, Kuwait, Bahrain, and also an American official said that Washington is examining the use of Tehran's frozen assets to repair future damages caused by the Revolutionary Guards, and perhaps also damages that have already been caused. So new satellite images reveal that Iran has restored dozens of entrances to its underground missile facilities that were damaged. Experts now assess that the attacks were, at least in part, only a temporary tactical disruption. And inside Iran, during Saturday, the student protests were renewed. The official reason is connected to internal Iranian pedagogical issues. But it is possible that beneath the surface, this is the beginning of another protest against the regime. We will bring you all the details very soon. And for the first time publicly, the president of Lebanon came out against Iran and claimed that the Revolutionary Guards are using Lebanon as a bargaining chip. The president of Lebanon attacked Iran following the continuation of the fighting in his country and addressed the Revolutionary Guards, saying, "You are not trying to help us. The citizens of Lebanon are paying the price for your interests." I'm Yair Pinto. With me is Mati Shoshani. We're here on Boots on the Ground, and we bring you the full truth about what's happening here in Israel and about the war against the Revolutionary Guards in Iran, which is the head of the crumbling axis of evil in the Middle East. And a second before we begin, I want to call on you to continue spreading the truth. Share our content with as many people as possible. Click on the subscribe button. And most importantly, don't forget to look for me, Yair Pinto, and for Mati Shoshani on our social media accounts to get a view through our eyes of what it's like to live here in Israel under this war. So, our senior Middle East correspondent, Mati Shoshani, is here with us. And Mati, is Iran making a strategic mistake by firing towards Kuwait and towards Bahrain, the Gulf states? Because instead of frightening the Gulf states themselves, they may finally get them to actually partner with Israel and with the United States and carry out attacks against the Ayatollah regime.
I'm not sure it's a mistake, Yair. I think it's a calculated decision that they made. I need to remind people that Iran has fired more at Gulf states during this last war than they did at Israel. And the reason for that is simple. They're more about regional dominance than they are just about fighting Israel or fighting the United States. It's about money, it's about control, it's about power. And you need to remember, these countries have a very complex and mixed relationship with Iran. They fear them, but they trade with them. They hate them and despise them sometimes, but they hold many of the Iranian assets within their countries, within their banking system, within their crypto banking system. So it's a very complicated relationship. Iran is doing the same thing they've done since day one. They pick on the little kid in the neighborhood, so he starts screaming and yells to President Donald, help me, help me, help me. The Iranians are firing, and they're hoping that that pressure brings the U.S. to the negotiation table. And again, we're playing a war here that's a war of attrition more than anything else. The conventional warfare ended long ago. We're fighting a war that wants to see how much financial damage one can cause. And if it's not financial damage, it's military pressure, diplomatic pressure through our buddies, through our friends. So the United States puts pressure on Iran by putting this squeeze on them with a military naval blockade, right? So cuts out their ability to sell oil. They're losing money. We know it's hurting them. We know they're panicking about that. They look around and they say, what can I do? I can't harm the U.S. on a military level. We know that. I can't harm them on a financial level. Israel is too strong and too far away to start that war again. What do? Boom, our neighbors in the Gulf. So that's what they've done time and time again. They're hoping that those countries feel the pain and then pressure the U.S. to go into an agreement. But there's one more thing here that we need to remember. We're not sure who's making these decisions within Iran. Iran has multiple factions that are fighting for power. And it seems that the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard Corps, has made a very decisive turn in the direction of regional disruption almost at any cost. I mean, they are part of what's called a 12th Shia. We say Tresari, dozen in Hebrew, but it's a 12th Shia sect within Islam that believes, and it's a longer story, but they believe that through violence and disruption, the Mahdi will appear. The Mahdi is their version of the Messiah. So you need to also look at it from that perspective. They're not necessarily concerned with warfare. They're not concerned with disruption. It actually, in their mind, brings forward the positive end of times when the entire region is engulfed in flames. So you need to see things from both eyes. One, there's a straightforward political decision of we harm the allies of our enemies. And the second one is they actually believe in an eschatological theology that calls on them or calls the region to be wrapped up in a war. And they look around and they say, well, maybe we're the ones who are supposed to make this happen. Let's do it. So it's those two things working in tandem with each other.
Yeah, Mati, and just this morning, I received a report that the United States is considering to use the Iranian frozen assets that are held in the Gulf states in order to compensate and rehabilitate and fix the damage that was caused by Iranian missiles and drones to the Gulf states themselves. And now there is a special committee at the Treasury Department that is evaluating the damage that was caused by Iran. You think that this will increase the pressure on the Ayatollah regime? Will that be like a lever that will push them towards the negotiations?
I don't know. I think it's both. I mean, if you look at the Iranian statements over the weekend, they started the weekend with, we want $12 billion cash or else. That was their beginning of the weekend. And the U.S., I think, is retaliating to that. Much of the war really has taken, as I previously mentioned, it's taken a turn in the direction of a financial attrition war. It's how much can you bleed your enemy? So the U.S. put a blockade on Iran, and that's preventing Iran from making money. Iran's looking around. They're trying to see how they can cause damage. They want to tax ships that are traveling through. They want to cause financial damage to other Gulf states. They're looking for ways to cause financial damage. They were saying, this is on Friday, Iran was saying openly, there will be no negotiation if we don't get of that give or take $100 billion of assets that are frozen. We want $12 billion cash to start the negotiation. The U.S., of course, said, very funny, Iran. That's what the U.S. said to them. But there's precedent to this, Yair. Under the Obama administration, the U.S. gave Iran $1.7 billion cash out of a smaller sum of frozen assets. So there is precedent to this. They're stacking their demands high in anticipation of a negotiation to take place. And the U.S. responds with the exact same coin, same token. It says, if you're asking for cash, we too are asking for cash. We're going to take your frozen assets. And if you keep up this bad behavior, before you know it, there are going to be no assets for you to get back. We're going to use them to compensate countries for the damage that you caused. So this is the negotiation game. It's the war of attrition. It's the financial pressure campaign that's taking place, all combined in a battle that's taken a public note in recent days of claiming, both the US and Iran, that they're going to use the frozen assets as a vehicle to end the stalemate when it comes to the negotiation.
All right, Mati, let's talk about the proxies of Iran. So you have the Iranian militias in Iraq, you have the Houthis in Yemen that were not in the news lately, and also you have the Hezbollah terrorist organization that have become the center point of the struggle. And it seems like Iran is doing everything they can in order to try and save this terrorist organization. Donald Trump just announced another ceasefire agreement in South Lebanon. And at the same time, yesterday, we have 4 IDF soldiers that were injured by a suicide drone that exploded and moderately wounded them. And also, just around a week ago, we have 3 United Nations peacekeeping forces that one of them was killed because of this suicide drone and the other 2 were wounded. So there is no ceasefire on the ground. And it seems like Hezbollah is becoming the major point of friction between Israel and Hezbollah. That's the direct war. And then the United States and Iran are like the parent companies of this situation. What do you think will happen next in this round? And will the United States agree to include Hezbollah in the ceasefire agreement?
It's a complicated question. I'd say, first of all, your base assumption is 100% correct. This is full-on proxy warfare. It's Iran trying to fight a war through Hezbollah, and the US trying to fight that war back through Israel to a certain degree, in a slightly different use of power. Well, what's important to understand here is the function of Hezbollah. Hezbollah is, for all intents and purposes, it's an imperialistic force that Iran built on the shores of Israel. They built them in southern Lebanon to be a thorn in the flesh of the Israeli state. They did this many years ago, several decades ago at this point. That's the goal of Hezbollah. And Iran looks from several perspectives at what's happening with Hezbollah. One, they're concerned. They don't want to lose this expensive asset. And by expensive, I mean like in cash. They spent a lot of money in building it. They don't want to lose the assets, so they're trying to wrap Hezbollah into whatever ceasefire takes place. That's one. There's another aspect to this, which is they want to maintain Hezbollah to be also in future conflicts a hammer that they can use against Israel, a weapon that they can turn against Israel. But it goes on. Iran also is constantly trying to maneuver the negotiation to its benefit. If the negotiation was about the Hormuz Strait and the nuclear, they say no. Now it's also about Lebanon. And of course, Iran knows that that's a condition that's very hard for the US to keep, because as we've heard in recent weeks, President Trump calls Prime Minister Netanyahu and says, Bibi, we need to slow down in Lebanon. And Israel is not slowing down in Lebanon, Yael. I mean, we know that for a fact. Israel continues to fight in Lebanon. Ceasefire, no ceasefire, we're still fighting against the Hezbollah terrorists in Lebanon, because the war in Lebanon is not against, the Lebanese government or the Lebanese people. It's against Hezbollah, the terrorist organization. So to summarize, Iran wants to always pull Hezbollah, Lebanon into the ceasefire agreement, both because they want to preserve Hezbollah for the next conflict, and 2, because it meets their needs of forever complicating the negotiation. And that's something we really need to not underestimate about the Iranians. Every time you think you're making progress with them in a negotiation, they always find something new to complain about, something new to argue about, a new point of the agreement that they're not in agreement about. If it wasn't this, it was that. If it wasn't the Strait of Hormuz, now it's frozen assets. They're constantly evolving in the request in the negotiation. And we've said this repeatedly in our analysis on this channel, that a lot of that has to do with the fact that there's weakness within Iranian leadership. If they were strong and they knew where they were going, they could be more clear about it. But since they're not all that they have, the only tool they have, considering the fact that they don't have unified leadership, strong leadership that can decide on a direction, all they have to do is more fighting, more saying no, more complicating the negotiation time and time again. And that's exactly what they're doing. And I want to say one last thing. The war that Israel is fighting against Hezbollah is not just a current events war. It's a war that's going to shape the future of the Middle East in years to come. Hezbollah is a destabilizing element that has been embedded into Lebanon. And if we are able to truly remove them from the southern part of Lebanon, to truly weaken them both in manpower, cash, and infrastructure, it could allow the Lebanese nation to build up their army and their government in a way that prevents Hezbollah from rebuilding itself. And that really is the goal here. The goal here is to build Lebanon at the expense of Hezbollah, not just to destroy Hezbollah, not just to beat Hezbollah, but to do it while building up Lebanon, the country and the army. And if that happens, well, we're golden, Yael.
Yeah, and I like the idea of having the pilot of areas that are 100% only under the control of the Lebanese government, while, if it works in small areas, then Israel can, position itself on a more strategic ground until the Lebanese military or special forces will be good enough and strong enough to withstand any kind of Hezbollah opposition. And I think that the best part here is that the United States has offered to train a special force of the Lebanese armed forces to get them up to date, to be able to deal with the most advanced and most capable terrorist organization in the world, which is the Hezbollah terrorist organization funded by the Ayatollah regime in Iran.
Absolutely.
So thank you very much, Mati, and we'll see you again in just a few hours for our second report of the day here on Boots on the Ground. And to all of you, if you want to see and receive more updates, more explainers, more behind the scenes from Mati Shoshani, look him up on his social media accounts. He's basically everywhere, Mati Shoshani. And make sure to hit the subscribe button on TBN Israel on our YouTube channel. And we invite you now to be part in something real, something rooted in the land and in our hearts. The Rebuild Israel campaign continues. It brings life back to Israel's north, along Israel's northern border, where Hezbollah is launching rockets, missiles, and destroying and burning our farmland, our agriculture, causing the population to move south. This is an area that was marked by war, displacement, and loss. And we are showing this terrorist organization that we're not just here to stay. We are here to plan, to rebuild, and to invest in the future. So in this campaign, you're helping us plant apple trees in the northern part of Israel. It's a commitment to rebuild what was damaged. And this orchard of apples is more than just agriculture. It actually creates jobs for the local families. It helps communities return and rebuild. And it sends a clear message to the people of Israel, you are not alone. And to our enemies, that you're not winning. Because God made a promise to the people of Israel, and he's going to fulfill. So when you donate, you're not just giving, you're actually rebuilding. Your support is putting trees, apple trees, on the ground. It restores livelihoods, jobs, and communities. And it transforms a land that is scarred by war into a land that grows again. This is how renewal takes root. This is how Israel rebuilds after war. So join us in restoring the north and strengthening the future of the land of Israel. You can go now to tbn.org/rebuild Israel. Again, that's tbn.org/rebuild Israel, or call 800-804-7895. Again, that's 800-804-7895. And help us by planting apple trees in the northern communities of Israel. The night began over the waters of the Strait of Hormuz, but very quickly it moved into the skies over Kuwait and Bahrain. Iran launched drones towards the area of the strait. American fighter jets were scrambled, shut down 4 of them, and then came the second stage, an American strike against radar and surveillance strikes in southern Iran. In the area of Guruk and on Qasem Island, the Iranian response did not take long. The Revolutionary Guards, they launched 7 ballistic missiles towards the American bases and Washington's allies in the Gulf. 6 of them were intercepted. 1 more missile did not reach its target. Sirens sounded in Bahrain. Air defensive systems were activated in Kuwait. And the United States made clear there were no American casualties. And the Iranian claims of hitting the headquarters of the 5th Fleet are false. But even if the missiles did not hit the targets that Tehran claimed, the choice of targets is the story. Iran did not fire only in order to respond. It fired in order to remind every Gulf state of one thing. Every country that hosts an American base, every country that helps freedom of navigation, and every country that stands on Washington's side may become part of the pressure front. And this is exactly where the war and the negotiations collide. Because in the same hours that American aircrafts were striking Iranian radar sites, Trump's envoys were preparing for an agreement. Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff visited the Oak Ridge National Laboratory in Tennessee and met with a team of about 100 American nuclear experts. Their mission is clear: to prepare the professional infrastructure in case an agreement with Iran will be signed. Not a diplomatic headline, not a picture of a signing ceremony, but very difficult technical work. How do you remove nuclear materials from Iran? How do you limit enrichment? How do you establish an inspection mechanism? How do you make sure that the regime does not leave itself a hidden path underground? On the table is a memorandum of understanding that is supposed to extend the ceasefire by 60 days, reopen the Strait of Hormuz, allow Iran to sell oil, and begin talks on its stockpile of enriched uranium. But this is where the problems begin. The Americans are demanding a 60-day timetable for dealing with the uranium. The Iranians are demanding 90 days. And this is not only a technical disagreement over the number of days, it is a disagreement over control. Who dictates the pace? Who makes the first concession? And who manages to buy time without paying a price? The second gap is the money. Tehran is demanding immediate access to billions of dollars from its frozen assets. According to the Iranian demand, this means about $12 billion up front and another $24 billion during the 60 days of negotiations that would begin after the interim agreement. All of this is out of roughly $100 billion in Iranian assets blocked around the world. The message from Tehran is simple. This is not a grant. This is not a prize. This is our money. A senior Iranian official even said that $24 billion is not a large amount for America if it truly wants to reach an agreement. But in Washington, they understand the trap. If Trump releases money before Iranian steps on the ground, he walks straight into the same criticism that he spent years directing at the Obama administration as part of the agreement of 2015. That's why the Americans are now saying something else. Not only we will not pay in advance, we may use Iranian assets to compensate the Gulf states for the damage caused by the Iranian attacks. United States Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent instructed teams to ask Gulf allies for damage assessments. The meaning is clear. If Iran fires at Kuwait and Bahrain and causes damage to property, infrastructure, or airports, Washington is examining the possibility of taking the money that the regime is demanding and transferring it instead to those that were harmed by the regime. That is a diplomatic blow, no less an economic one. Because Iran is trying to turn the frozen funds into a card that forces the Trump administration to move towards an agreement, the United States is trying to turn that same card into a warning. Keep firing, and you may also lose the money that you are demanding. But the military story does not end in the skies over the Gulf. New satellite images over Iran reveal a much more complicated picture than the one Tehran tried to present, and also a much more complicated picture than the one that Washington would like to see. At 18 underground missile facilities, extensive engineering activity was identified. Out of 69 entrances and exits that were hit or blocked in the airstrikes, the Iranians managed to restore about 50. This was not done with especially advanced technology, not with secret systems, mostly bulldozers, earth graders, and trucks. And that is exactly what is worrying, because if so many openings can be restored in such a short time, it means that the Iranian infrastructure was built in advance to observe the strikes, not to prevent every hit, but to keep operating even after it was hit. And at the Dizful base, for example, according to the findings, 4 out of 5 damaged entrances were restored to operation. In the Isfahan area, many craters were seen on the surface, but according to the assessments, the deep concrete structure of the facilities remained mostly intact. at the Khamenei facility, rubble clearing and emergency exit restoration work accelerated in order to secure the missile stockpile that remained there and preserve the operational capabilities. This is not a picture of total victory. This is a picture of disruption. The strikes managed to delay, to hit the entrances, to hit the roads, and to hit the systems above ground. But the deep missile warehouses, the branching tunnels, and the ability to open alternative accesses and other routes, all of this makes the Iranian system much harder to paralyze. And that brings us back to Trump's statements. In his latest interview, he said that Iran still has roughly 21 or 22% of its missiles. He admitted that this is still a lot of missiles, but emphasized that it is not what Iran had when the strikes began. He also added, "We know where they are." That statement is aimed at two audiences. To the American audience, Trump is saying, "We hit Iran hard. We are not facing the same capability that existed at the beginning of the campaign." But to Tehran, he's saying something completely different. Even what you still have is already in our sights. And before we continue, this is exactly the time to join us. So if you want to understand the Middle East as it really looks from the ground, and not only through distant headlines like this report, share it, click the subscribe button, leave a comment, let me know where you're watching from, because we bring you the information from Israel, from the ground. So if you want to help us, hit the subscribe button on TBN Israel, our YouTube channel, so you never miss another update of Boots on the Ground. Now, meanwhile, the third arena that is complicating everything is Lebanon. The Lebanese president, Joseph Aoun, came out against Iran in a very unusual way. He said that the people of Lebanon are tired of the war between Israel and Hezbollah and accused Tehran of using Lebanon as a bargaining chip against Israel and against the United States. His most important sentence was directed at the Revolutionary Guards. "You're not trying to help us. The citizens of Lebanon are paying the price for your interests. This is not your country." In the Middle East, when a Lebanese president says a sentence like that publicly, it's not only criticism, it is a cry for help. Aoun is demanding that Hezbollah publicly accept the terms of the ceasefire with Israel. According to him, once all sides agree, it can be implemented within 24 hours. But Hezbollah rejects the understandings. Naim Qassem says that as long as Israel remains on Lebanese soil, the fighting will continue. And this is exactly where the Iranian connection lies. Tehran does not want an agreement with Washington to separate the arenas. From its point of view, Hormuz, the nuclear issue, the money, Lebanon, and Hezbollah are all part of the same package. If it is required to open the strait, talk about uranium, and absorb the economic pressure, it wants to stop Israel in Lebanon and preserve Hezbollah as a strategic asset. Israel sees this in exactly the opposite way. From Jerusalem's point of view, Iran must not be allowed to use an American agreement to save Hezbollah. The organization must not be allowed to remain armed south of the Litani River, closer to the Israeli border, and it must not be given several months to rebuild its drone array, its launch positions, its control rooms, and its Radwan commando forces and infrastructures. So on the ground, the price is already heavy. Over the weekend, it was cleared for publication that Captain Shachar Gamla, an officer in the Igoz infantry unit, died of his wounds after being hit by an explosive drone during operational activity in southern Lebanon. 2 other soldiers were wounded in the same incident. Shahar, 24 years of age, from Natur in the Golan, served as the deputy commander of the company. His family decided to donate his organs. In another incident, Sergeant Ohad Yaari, a soldier in the Shaked battalion of the Givati brigade, was killed by an accidental discharge in southern Lebanon. He was 21 years of age, a student at the Ma'alot Chesder Yeshiva, and left behind his parents and 3 brothers. These are not numbers on a map. These are families. These are names. And this is the price of an arena that continues even while people are talking about a ceasefire. Now we need to look inward, into Iran itself. The regime is trying to project power. It fires at the Gulf, bargains with Washington, sets conditions in Lebanon, and presents itself as having survived the strikes. But beneath the surface, Iran is under deep economic, internal, and strategic pressure. Western research institutes assess that Iran's problem is no longer only the sanctions. It is the erosion of an entire governing model, an economy managed through parallel centers of power, institutions connected to the Revolutionary Guards, a decline in trust, a decline in investment, Iranian investors looking for ways to move money out, and a parallel market that keeps expanding while the official institutions lose control. And at the same time, there are signs of unrest in the streets. Report speaks of student protests in many cities, including in Tehran, the capital, in Isfahan, in Mashhad, in Shiraz, and in Tabriz. The official reason is a change in the exam conditions, but in Iran, a protest that begins around a small civilian issue can very quickly become a much larger question. Against whom is the anger really directed? And that explains why the regime is insistent on the money. An interim agreement is not only supposed to save the negotiation, it is supposed to give Tehran oxygen, to open the economic tap a little, to reduce internal pressure, to show the public that the war did not bring only destruction, but also a result. But here lies the paradox. Iran needs an agreement today more than in the past, but its ability to turn an agreement into a strategic recovery looks more limited than before. Its regional axis has been worn down. Hezbollah is under pressure. Lebanon is trying to distance itself from Iran. The Gulf states see Iran as a more direct threat. And inside Iran itself, the debate is no longer only about how to fight the West, but whether to continue funding a regional project while the home front itself is weakening. This is where the new concept of the Revolutionary Guards comes in. In the past, Iran tried to deter through proxies, Hezbollah in Lebanon, militias in Iraq, the Houthis in Yemen, and pressure networks in Syria and the Gulf. The idea was simple. In Israel or the United States, if they attack Iran, the whole region will burn. But the last war exposed that this method has been worn down. The proxies have not disappeared, but they no longer give Iran the same layer of protection. That's why Tehran is trying to build a direct equation with Washington, not only through Hezbollah, not only through the militias, but through controlled frictions with the American military itself. Drones over Hormuz, missiles towards Kuwait and Bahrain, warning fire near shipping routes, a demand for passage approval, an attempt to present the Strait of Hormuz as an area where the Revolutionary Guards set the rules. Tehran does not necessarily want a full-scale war, but it does want the United States to feel that every action against it will carry an immediate price in the Gulf. This is a very serious and dangerous strategy, because as long as the missiles are intercepted and as long as American soldiers are not killed, it can be managed as a crisis. One missile hitting a base is enough. One drone hitting a ship is enough. One interceptor failing over a civilian city is enough. And then the controlled war can stop being controlled. And above all of this hovers the nuclear question. So if Tehran concludes that the proxies are not enough and that direct deterrence against the United States is the only way to protect the regime, the internal debate over the nuclear issue may take a more dangerous direction, not only a threshold state, not only a bargaining chip, but perhaps a completely different model, one in which the very nuclear threat becomes a guarantee for the regime's survival. That is exactly what worries Israel, because while the world talks about 60 days or 90 days about opening Hormuz or releasing the funds, Jerusalem is looking at a wider picture. The missile tunnels are being restored. Hezbollah is trying to stay on its feet. Iran is testing the threshold of the American response, and the nuclear issue is still at the center of the table. This is not a stable ceasefire. This is a ceasefire with the engine still running. The question now is whether Washington will succeed in turning the pressure into an agreement that dismantles real capabilities, or whether Iran will use the next agreement to buy time, open tunnels, release money, and return to the next round stronger. So keep spreading the truth. Follow us. And most importantly, don't forget to hit the subscribe button on TBN Israel on our YouTube channel, where we report from the ground, boots on the ground style. So make sure to look for Mati Shani and Yair Pinto on our social media accounts. And the best thing that you can do in this situation is pray. I would start by praying for those who are directly impacted by the Ayatollah regime in Iran, which are the Iranian people. Let's pray for the Iranian people, that God will comfort them, that he will rescue them from this evil regime. Let's pray for the Gulf states under attack to choose to align with the US and with Israel against this tyrannical regime. Let's pray for the people of Lebanon that are trying also to release themselves from the Hezbollah terrorist organization. Pray for the children in the northern parts of Israel. Pray for our team, please, for the technical staff, for Tomer, our director, for Mati, myself, and our families, and the rest of the team behind the scenes here. Keep praying for the peace of Jerusalem.